Welcome back to the tasting room. I wish you guys could have seen behind the scenes what Ian and Chip just saw with us running around. We had it set up for 2, and then we set it up for 3, and then we had to find new. I mean, dude, I'm glad there's bourbon here.
Yes.
Nothing is as easy as it's supposed to be.
Never. What's the equivalent in your world? Let's take Topeca to what I just went through. What's the equivalent there?
Any catering event.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Anytime you have so many moving pieces and you're ad hocing
Right.
a setup.
All right, so Chip, introduce yourself and kind of what your title is with the businesses you're involved in, and then introduce Ian for us.
Yeah. So my name is John Gaberino, but I go by Chip. I'm the third, and my nickname is Chip. I got involved in food and beverage businesses back in 2002 when I started Topeca. And now we have a management company that is called G&B Provisions, Gaberino Bush, that manages them all over everything from Topeca and Hodges, Lowood, the coffee shops, Saturn, a bunch of stuff.
You would have thought I would have figured out GB was Gaberino Bush, but when
Is
he
it-
sent
is it
me that,
such
I was like, GB, huh? It's just, maybe they're Green Bay fans. I don't know. And then where did you come in? What's your story?
Yeah. So I started with Chip, 2009. Got hired on to package coffee. Actually, initially I was demonstrating coffee, brewing coffee, giving out samples at Reese's because we just had gotten the Reese's account. So back then it was just 3 of us.
We were moving the roaster from the Mayo. Wasn't that the year you
Yeah, just moved into this little
strip mall?
strip mall on 13th in Houston by the Greek Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
Originally, we were roasting in the Mayo Hotel.
Yeah. And so it was an interesting setup. I don't know what it was before, but it was kind of like separate rooms, like imagine little office rooms. And so it's like roasting in one little room, packaging in another room, his office in one room, a warehouse in another room. We were there, I don't know, for a
We
year.
had the conveyor too, where when the containers would come, we had this like rolling container, and you would slide a bag all the way from the container into the room, back into the room.
What I think the coffee industry is really interesting because, I mean, I'm not in it. I just drink it, right? But I feel like it's a lot like the craft beer world a few years ago, where people just started migrating away from the Budweisers and the Miller Coors, and they were going to the like local craft stuff. And I don't know if Starbucks is the equivalent to that, but I feel like nowadays you see whether it's Topeca or, I mean, there's a handful of, local where they roast and they do all the stuff here in town. And no matter what city you go to, the bigger the city, the more there are. Am I right in that?
Yeah. I mean, they really coincide together. We refer to the kind of the 3 waves of coffee. So we're sort of coming out of the 3rd wave. I would say we're probably into a 4th wave or a new movement in coffee. But yeah, it was that early 2000s, the same when kind of the craft beer scene really started taking off. But at that time with coffee, 3rd wave roasters were roasters that were Starbucks would have been the 2nd wave. So real quick, like the 3 waves, the first wave would have been, at the dawn of the industrial era, when coffee all of a sudden, becomes a global commodity, right? So you think about things like Folgers and things like brands like that, those heritage brands. And really that was due to, industrialization and mechanization and the industrial sort of agriculture that was taking place in Brazil, being able to supply a world demand of coffee. And then the like Pete's in San Francisco, and then Starbucks just a little later. They are sort of the start of that 2nd wave, where it's going away from that commodity type mindset and more of a quality focused, and really driven by like bringing European style like espresso and espresso beverages into the menu and creating that European cafe feel. And then Starbucks took that a step further and really drove that as a marketing model and really pushed that whole sort of, latte culture and cafe culture that you kind of associate with the 90s. That would have been the second wave. And then that third wave kind of then is people who, mostly baristas who worked at Pete's and Starbucks at that time, now branching out on their own and thinking, well, there's got to be something better than this. It's not just for the money. It's not just a marketing scheme. There's got to be coffee that's better quality. There's got to be a sustainability component to it. We have to know where our coffee is coming from so that you can verify things like quality and garner those supplier relationships with farmers. So for the first time, there were, small roasters that were going directly to the source and establishing relationships with one-on-one with farmers and paying them actual fair prices for, based off of the quality of the coffee and the terms of the relationship. So all of a sudden there's this sort of like transparency that exists that never did before. And then with that quality and interest in different ways, different approaches to roasting the coffee, primarily lighter roasting, so you can really taste the quality of the coffee. And then, I don't know, over the past 20 years, it's just been a lot of innovation of from roasting to brewing to, the atmosphere of coffee shops have changed a lot. Different types of beverages, ready to drink products, are huge now. So yeah, but it came up really in pace with craft beer and then craft distilleries. And
so Chip, what got you? Or go ahead. Were you going to add to that?
Yeah, like the third wave was really a response, economic response, because, and that's really why I got involved in originally. My background originally was computer science. I was a programmer. Had nothing to do with coffee or food or beverage, and I was always a problem solver and enjoyed finding problems and then trying to figure out a solution. And while I was getting my MBA here at OSU Tulsa, my mother-in-law, whose family's been growing coffee in El Salvador for now over 170, 180 years.
That's amazing.
She came and visited us to see her new granddaughter and asked if I wanted to get involved in helping because what the farm was getting paid had dropped to an all-time low of about 42 cents a pound, which was significantly different than what we pay here as a consumer, and as well as, more importantly, was that it was significantly different than the cost. So the cost at the time ranged between 85 and 95 cents a pound. And so, globally, it was a really big industry-wide problem. And the roasters that had started in the late 90s really to focus on quality and had started to develop these one-on-one relationships with farmers and not just buying from these large green bean importers, they saw firsthand the damage that the commodity market was doing to these farmers. And around that time when we started, the system that existed, the C market, had a differential for quality of what they would pay you on top of the market price. But it wasn't enough to justify the cost and work involved in implementing the actions that were needed in order to result in that increased cup score, right? Which is what they would pay you if your coffee tasted better.
Right.
And so, but the roasters that were trying to create this new segment of the industry knew that they had a customer that would pay more if the quality was there. And so it really, there was a group of us that in the first 5 to 10 years of the 2000s really went head first, and jumped in the pool and went all in on flying down to the farms and constantly developing those relationships, because there was a fear that, honestly, from the consumer roasting side, that the system was going to break essentially, and that the production of coffee was going to start dropping and quality was going to drop. And if those two things aren't there, then we can't buy the product we need in order to sell it.
Right.
And so, you know, I got involved, I think probably one of the only small independent roasters that I know of that didn't get involved because I was obsessed with coffee. Almost everybody that I've ever met got into it because they were obsessed with coffee. And I was obsessed with food and beverage. I went to school in New Orleans, and I, you know, dedicated a certain, rather than going and buying cheap beer, I would always save a certain amount every week and have, you know, a nice meal and a nice cocktail or something. But I honestly didn't really consume much coffee. And it was, I think I got through my MBA with Dr. Pepper.
There you go.
My passion was that it was really sad to me to see what seemed like such a beautiful family tradition of farming and producing coffee for the world was going to die after 120 years of doing it and generations. And so, and it was all because of a system that really was in favor of someone sitting at a computer and
trading futures.
Yeah. Who can hedge risk and has warehouses of coffee, and you know, it wasn't designed to benefit the farmer.
Yeah, especially the small farmer, the average farmer.
Right. And it does produce a functionality because it allows for liquidity, and a lot of times farmers need to be able to sell the coffee immediately, right? In order to cash out so they can pay the bank. But it's rigged in a manner that is really difficult for a small farmer to make it. So that's how I got. And then once I got into it, you know, and I was working with my brother-in-law immediately from the beginning. She also did the exact same thing and flew up to Portland. He was graduating from school up there. And he was like, am I going to go into the beer industry, or am I going to go back home to El Salvador and get into coffee? And she convinced him to.
That's awesome.
Come back. And so he actually has been working in El Salvador for since back in 2001, 2002. And then we together have just been working to cut the middle guy out and doing everything from planting the seed to exporting or processing the coffee, exporting, importing, roasting, serving it in a cup to the consumer.
I'm really excited to delve into what we have here, and I love this idea. So explain.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your coffee, it's Topeca Coffee, but what did we do here?
So I was told to bring some things, so I brought some coffee. I was told that you had discerning tastes.
Yes.
So and value quality. So
very true.
I kind of wanted to focus on comparing the same coffee, but prepared in two different manners.
Okay.
So you know, when we think about quality, there are so many variables that have to add up just right to get you like a perfect cup of coffee, or what would be considered, you know, an optimum cup of coffee. If you go all the way back to the farm level, I mean, it's everything from, you know, the environment to the soil to the genetics of the coffee to the weather conditions of this growing to how it's harvested, how it's processed and dried and exported and then roasted, and then now we're focusing on difference in brewing. So yeah, you can buy a nice bag of beans that you know it's quality specialty coffee, specialty grade, it's been roasted well, but you know, it's just like giving someone raw ingredients and say, okay, cook a 5-star dish. Right. You need to use you know, good ingredients and then have correct methods. So we're going to taste a coffee from the family farm. This is actually from the two family farms, the two farms that the family owns. And the original farm is called Finca Ayutepeque. The other farm is Finca El Manzano, and they're both on the Santa Ana volcano in El Salvador. So this blend is a blend of of coffees from those two farms, and it's called the Santa Ana blend. And it's one of our more popular blends. It's a light roast. And so we're going to taste it brewed as maybe just the average person might brew it at home. So we're
like
using
a Mr. Coffee machine type
we got
thing,
like a
right?
Mr. Coffee, $20 special at Walgreens sort of deal with a little, with one of those little I call them whirligigs.
Whirligigs, I like that.
The little blade grinders, little brawn blade grinder, and tap water, just using Tulsa tap water. So the thing to keep in mind with coffee, it's a brewed coffee. About 98% of it is water. Okay, so if you're not using good water, that's really going to impact the taste. So with tap water, you've got who knows what's in there. It's the values are different every municipality that you may be. So you have different minerals. You've got additives in there for sterilization. Chlorine and bromine and chlorides and chloramine and all that kind of
all
stuff.
The things.
Yeah. So, at a cafe, we're typically going to filter that out because they don't provide very good taste. They have an odor to them and they have a bad taste. So we like to filter that out so you're not tasting that. But then we also need the water to have like just the right amount of minerals in there to add good flavor, but also it reacts with the chemistry of how it's brewing, and which is going to equate or result in a taste outcome. So we brewed one coffee, just tap water. I used a whirligig grinder. I just used like the scoop.
Love that name.
We're doing this just so we can say whirligig.
Right.
Just like a scoop method. Yep. Okay, a scoop per cup sort of thing. And so we'll taste that first.
Perfect. Here, I'll move that. So while he's pouring, Chip, how have you seen in Tulsa since you opened Topeca and got into the restaurant game as well, the culture of fine dining and the culture of enjoying, good local coffee, or not local coffee, but, from local companies and not the big chains. How have you seen that evolve in Tulsa?
Yeah. Also, real quick, I just want to brag about, so he started out as a packager, but he has worked his way up over the last 10 years.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
I didn't do a good job introducing myself.
He's now the coffee director of Topeca. He really controls, at the end of the day, everything. And was the U.S. roaster champion that we went to Italy in 2018.
Oh, I heard about that. I didn't realize I was sitting next to Coffee Royalty over there.
To represent the
Congrats,
US.
man.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
So it's been really being part of the Midwest and specifically Tulsa. I think that I always say that culturally, not only in general, but also specifically culinary wise, we're very similar to being a small Kansas City versus small Kansas City versus, say, Oklahoma City's a Dallas, right? And I feel like the evolution of the crafts in Tulsa, it tends to be much more authentic and over time, and more based on, and like a lot of the people who through the last 20 years that have actually affected the direction nationwide and globally in especially coffee came from the Midwest with a scientific approach to it and a very methodical mindset instead of just kind of a whatever's coolest at the time.
This is an interesting side-by-side, by the way.
It's been sitting here for a little bit, but
so that's my fault.
No, it's my fault. I should have told you that.
That's okay.
I was bringing my friend.
I'm glad you did.
So I think what's cool is in both coffee and the restaurants is that we've kind of made it our own, right? And there's been such a good support in the ownership of the buildings in downtown that I think has created almost a one-of-a-kind environment for a downtown where it isn't dominated as it's grown by a bunch of chains or national companies. It's really been focused on a growth being driven by locals and individuals who left or made Tulsa their home and wanted to add something to the scene and to the growth of the culinary environment here. So coffee wise, I think it's awesome how such a small city has some of the best coffee that you can get from different multiple roasters in Tulsa, and I'm always impressed whenever I go to other cities that are supposed to that have double, triple the population and it's supposed to be amazing, and you go there and the quality of the product and service is just not the same. Sometimes the amount of money they can throw on a build out can be super flashy and fancy. But even then, sometimes it almost feels too curated rather than something that feels more authentic. So I'm really proud of what we as a city have done.
Absolutely. So talk to me about what you're tasting here.
So I'm almost questioning if I got the waters mixed up. Because I had a confusion over the labels on the two tubs.
I definitely taste a difference, though.
Yes.
This one's brighter.
The one that was on the right.
Yeah. So the one I poured you first is it's got a really light body because. So first of all, like the whirligig, the thing there, the grind is really one of the most important aspects of the brew. It's like, okay, you've probably sauteed some vegetables.
I have.
All right. So if you want to get every piece of that vegetable cooked evenly, what would you do?
They have to be cut the same size.
You'd have to cut them the same size, right? Yeah. If you're cutting big pieces and little pieces and throw it in the pan, you're going to get some pieces that are overcooked, burnt. You're going to get some pieces that are not cooked and raw, right? So same thing with coffee. If it's got enough, if you chop it up unevenly, you grind it up unevenly, when you go to brew it, you're going to be over extracting some, the smaller pieces. You're going to be, dissolving too much flavor and the unwanted flavors out of there, the astringent and bitter flavors. And then the larger pieces, you're going to be under extracting. You're not going to be pulling enough flavor out of it. So it's going to be this really uneven taste. It's also probably going to come out kind of weak, as in the case of this one that we're tasting from the Mr. Coffee. Whereas the other grinder I used was a quality burr grinder that grinds the coffee in a much more consistent way. So you have more pieces of the coffee that are similar sized. So they brew at a more even consistency. So you just get a fuller cup of coffee with fuller flavor.
Yeah.
And then you can control that flavor more easily by the grind, by making it finer or coarser to give you, a fuller extraction or a less extraction just based off how you kind of like it to taste. And so that's kind of the difference we're tasting here.
Absolutely.
Is just something that's a lot fuller and has like more acidity and more flavor going on versus something that tastes kind of like dirty water or just kind of a tainted water. The extraction's not very good, so it's kind of like papery.
Yeah. I want to go inside baseball with the grind size too. I've tried to figure this out, and like I even try to take notes on it, and I can't figure it out. If there's a correlation for those that do pour overs or AeroPress or whatever at home, if there's a correlation between where the coffee comes from to the correct grind size for that coffee, and maybe it's not region, maybe it's your preference on flavor, because like you were talking about the finer the grind, the kind of more complex flavor you get. But is there some rhyme or reason?
Yep, absolutely. So grind is directly correlated to brew time, or to the amount of time that hot water is going to be in contact with the grounds. So the longer the time, you want a coarser grind, and the shorter the time, you want a finer grind. And so time might be something that's dictated by the brew method. If you're doing like a pour over, like look at a dripper, those typically are going to be, water is going to be moving through that, I don't know, anywhere in the 2 to maybe 5 minute range. So like a medium to medium fine grind, something like a table salt sort of texture is going to be good for that. if you're doing something a longer brew, or you have a brewer, you're brewing a full pot and it takes 8 minutes to, move all that water through the grounds. You probably want to coarsen up that grind, have something more like a kosher salt consistency. And then if you're doing like an espresso, that's brewed under pressure in 30 seconds. That's a very, very fine grind because it's a very fast contact time. So it really is you're going to match your grind with the time that it takes to brew the coffee is kind of the number one rule, general rule.
Gotcha.
And then depending on the coffee, we're going to roast it different, right? Depending on how dense the coffee is, depending on the process. If it's a natural coffee where the fruit was left on the around the bean and dried, all that sugar was dried into the green bean before we roasted it, or if it's a washed coffee. And then depending on the roast as well, and then the coffee itself is how it's prepared and the density, those are all going to change how the water is going to interact with it, and then how what you're going to be wanting to get out of it. And so, the changing point, I think one of the changing points for me was shifting the mind to think that it's not just that you have this singular component, coffee, and you add water and coffee comes out. It's has actually more flavor components in it than wine. And so it technically is more complex, and so understanding that they don't all extract at the exact same time. So that's where the key is if you have it consistently ground, and then you understand the coffee that you're brewing, of what the temperatures and times that allow you to get out what you want to get out of it and leave in the grounds what you don't like. Luckily, typically the more stringent, less flavorful elements of coffee are the least soluble. And so if you get an under-extracted coffee, meaning that you don't get as much out as you want to or should get out, you'll end up typically having a very sour coffee.
Kind of sour, papery kind of taste, dull.
And
weak.
then if you keep extracting, if you had kept extracting, you would have gotten more of the sugars out, and you end up getting more balanced, flavorful, where you get the sweetness and body as well as the acidity.
And can you go over as well?
Yeah, you can go over and you start pulling out those astringent and more bitter compounds.
Battery acid.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing.
Or the
to
alkaline
me.
compounds.
Like I feel like there's so many people that drink coffee, and yet I don't even know what percentage, but I would say probably 95% of them, you go in, you order a coffee, they pour it out of a carafe. They don't think about it. They don't they don't think about the difference in the bean, the skin, and the natural versus there's just so many. You can get so in depth. Was it a learning process for you when you first got into it? I mean, you've talked about it, probably still is, right?
Yeah. I think it there are some things, for instance, I don't mind a cheap beer, and there's a great quality to just having cheap beer, but there's also an appreciation for, not for everybody, but for some, obviously, and enough for a market to have a more expensive and higher quality ingredient, more complicated process that results in a unique product. Yeah. And I think the same is for coffee, right? I wouldn't really want to be drinking, let's say, Boone's wine, right? Or like some super cheap wine that we drink in high school. But and coffee for me is the same. I know a lot of coffee professionals, and especially the coffee industry, that can still appreciate like sitting at a diner and drinking a cup of diner coffee.
It was made 7 hours ago.
I don't have any desire to drink Boone's wine anymore. And so I'd rather have like a cheap beer if I had to choose. And so with coffee for me, like it's either has to be a certain level of quality or I have to have had wake up with after too much fun the night before. Then I'll probably drink just about anything, I guess. But
I'm going to pour us some of the bourbon here. Talk me through Italy. What went into that, the whole like qualification process, and then what was it like being over there?
Yeah, so that was part of the World of Coffee event. So this is a organization that does coffee competitions for coffee professionals, and there are many different nations that take part in these competitions. So the it started out on a regional level. Did a competition 2018, and then that led to the national event.
And when you say competition, describe like what you're actually
Yeah,
competing
so the
in.
roasting competition, and it was a little bit different format the year that I did it than it currently is now, but essentially, and there are several different competitions, from roasting to barista competition to Brewers Cup to a tasting competition. The newest one is a spirits, coffee and good spirits, which is kind of like mixology competition. So the roaster portion of it is focused around the craft of roasting and the art of taking a coffee that all of the components get as compulsory coffee, and you basically have a actually you get I think 3 or 5 different choices of coffee that you can choose to make a blend from. So it's a very like high stress. It's almost like a chopped or something. Where
Sure,
it's like,
yeah.
Okay, you're given.
That's how I envisioned it in my mind.
That's how it
You're given ingredients.
That's
It's not that quick pace. I mean, you get a couple days to do your R&D and do sample roasting and cupping and figuring out how you design your roast profile for the coffees and a blend profile for your blend. So you don't have as much time as you would in the real world. Obviously, you have like a day to figure all that out, and everything's timed. Your sample roasting session is timed. So you only have like the bare minimum amount of time to get 3 short roasts out on a sample roaster, and then your cupping is, you get 45 minutes to get in there and cup your coffees and make your notes. And then you have to, from that information, then you have to come up with a roast plan, profile, design that roast on a roaster that you've probably never roasted on before. So you're getting to know, the new equipment. And a lot of competitors, myself included, found an opportunity beforehand to seek out a place that had a roaster.
So you knew what the roaster was?
Yeah, you know what the roaster is and what size it is. And there was a coffee school out in California I went to basically train on the roaster and know how it behaves and reacts. And so, had a little advantage going in with that. But so you got to design this blend. You got to present a roast plan for each component and the blend component. You have to just have very accurate, specific descriptors of how you intend it to taste in the cup. So all of this is like blind faith, because you only have this like one chance to like taste this coffee, sample roast it, taste it, come up with a roast plan for it. You don't even get a chance to like.
I'm stressing out.
You don't get to even like try out your roast and then be like, okay, this one's the best one, and I know how it tastes. I mean, you're predicting how it's going to taste. So it's not really like real world applicable at all, but it's what it is. And then you get graded on those descriptors. And if you call, lemon and then the judges don't taste lemon, or, that's points off. And then you've got to predict what roast color it's going to end up at. And, you have to stick to your plan. You're measured. Your roast curve is measured against your plan. So, if you are aiming for a 15-minute roast, let's say at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and you end up roasting a 13-minute roast at 410 degrees Fahrenheit, that's points off. And then, so you got to present a blend. You're judged on that blend, and then everybody gets one compulsory coffee, one single origin coffee that you have to roast and do all the same stuff for. So you have to present a single origin. Everybody's going to present that, and then you present a unique blend. So those coffees are cupped and then scored, and whoever puts the best cup out according to the judges, the panel of judges.
Hard.
It was cool because he was going up against La Colombe and Stumptown and Blue Bottle, some of the best roasters out there.
So when I won the U.S., the format, that's the world format, and that's what I did in Italy. and now the U.S. has adapted that format. But when I did the U.S., so I had a disadvantage going into the world because I was unfamiliar with the format.
Gotcha.
In the U.S., it was a little bit different. It was same kind of deal. We had all the players had a compulsory coffee that we roasted. On the same. Everybody used the same machine, same coffee. You had to do the same. You got to sample roast it, taste it. From that, design your plan, execute the plan. Get a couple tries to execute that roast that you want, and then it gets cupped blindly and judged. And so I got the highest score on out of anything on the table for the compulsory coffee. But what was unique about the U.S. Is that they actually included a presentation aspect. So like the barista competitions is very presentation heavy. So they wanted to do something like that for the roasters. So the first round was actually you brought your own coffee, a coffee of your choice, to kind of to highlight, and you actually had to present on it. You had to present on both roasts, the compulsory and the coffee that you brought, and you were judged on both. Most of it was weighted towards the compulsory, but I scored really well in the presentation of my coffee, and then we had a really unique coffee from our farm that tasted really nice. So
is that the SL?
Yeah, the SL34, which will be coming out here next month.
So I think at everything we do, at all of our operations, at its root, it has always been about, and I think that's why Noah and I ended up partnering on so many other businesses, is that we had this in common, is that it's a high level of obsession for quality. And it's not about, and for both of us too, it was about how to do quality consistently, because having 2 out of 10 that are a 10, but the rest of them are all 5s or even worse, isn't good. Right. And so having quality and doing it consistently is significantly more difficult. And so we've just constantly, over the last 20 years, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in training and in education and in R&D. And I went through a phase we were talking about yesterday where, because we're cleaning out, we had these shipping containers that we were using for storage, and we're cleaning them out. And we had all these devices that I was trying to create myself like a mad scientist.
Design these things just because I don't know what your reasoning was. You thought it was going to save you money.
I was so determined. But not only that, like, because we had
instead of just, for example, all right, so our old bags used to have a tin tie on it. That's the little crimp tin tie thing. So instead of just paying an extra 5 cents per bag to have a tin tie already applied to the bag, you could buy the bags with tin tie applied. Because we used to buy the tin ties not applied, and you'd have to sit there and put every tin tie on every bag.
That is tedious.
And so he was like, I'm going to design a tin tie applicator that takes a whole, a big roll of continuous tin tie, and you can stick a bag in and then use like a foot pedal, and it'll, press the tin tie down and cut it off.
Spends another.
Yeah. He probably spent like thousands of dollars on this, paying some designer, some kid in college. It was like an engineer to engineer it and design it. And we built this prototype. I was just like, I finally just reached out to the bag supplier, and I was like, how much is it to just buy bags with tin ties on it? And they're like 5 cents. I was like, good, done.
Sold. Good, let's just do that. Yeah.
We had this initial brewer at Hodges when we opened, was this creation I had where we took up an espresso boiler, Marzocco boiler, and we had copper tubing that went up in a circular, what's that called? A closed circuit, and had a loop. So it would go up above, the boiler was underneath, had this cool, clear plexiglass case. And
I remember this.
And when we first opened.
And so
hot water would come up.
It would pump up into this kind of bar that had
little taps on
it. That had little plastic spigot things that you could actually maneuver to control the water and
make pour overs.
Okay. And it was a great idea, but it just didn't work. But it had a copper tube, and then had an insulation, and then a big old copper tube to go around and make it look cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is most pumps that you can just buy off the the store shelf. They're not designed to be continuously pumping 200-degree water.
Fair. Yeah.
All day long. So we just kept burning those out.
But we're obsessed about quality and reinvesting in the equipment, the software, the hardware, the people, the education. It's the only way to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. How does this hit your palate?
Really nice.
It's really nice.
I wish you guys could have tasted. So I got that in from a bourbon group I'm in. The guys that shipped it are out of Michigan. It's MGP distillate out of Indiana, but it was, I think, bottled in Iowa, something like that. It's NASA Family Reserve. But when I first opened it, I wasn't sure. And then I was looking at my cabinet today, and I was like, I bet since I poured the neck out and just let it sit for probably about a month, I was like, I bet that's completely changed the flavor profile. And now I think it's delicious.
There's a lot of caramel.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like corn, and it reminds me of, well, no, I said it, caramel corn. But
yeah, it is very sweet.
yeah.
I like it quite a bit. So we'll start to wrap up. I know you guys gotta get going. I like to ask people that are in different industries kind of what they feel like they would want to see be next in their world. And so you can talk about it from any standpoint, right? From the bar standpoint, from the food standpoint, or from Topeca, from the coffee standpoint. But I'm curious to get your opinion on the coffee side of it, because I don't know. I mean, now I think we're at this good spot where if you have a good location and it's welcoming for people, you'll see people sitting there and working all day, and it's a community within itself, right? Like the people that just come into coffee shops and do their thing. What in your mind is next? Like where does it go? Where does it go from there?
I don't know where it goes. I just know what the challenges are, and that are unique to now. Like you talked about community. You know, I grew up in the 90s and was going to coffee shops in the 90s and early 2000s when it was still like the coffee house. You know, it was a place, it was that like place for the misfits, you know, and there was a community of people just sort of hanging out, and probably no money being put in the cash register, but yet somehow, you know, the business kept going. And now, like, I think the challenges are many. One, it's expensive to run any business. It's expensive to, you know, run a cafe with staff and overhead and all that. And coffee is a lot more expensive than it was, you know, back in the 90s. I kind of feel like maybe the shops could stay open because they were serving really cheap coffee, right?
Yeah.
And now when you have, even though, you know, a cup of coffee might cost you $3, $4, or $5 for just a drip coffee, you got to understand that the roasters probably, you know, the cost for that cup of coffee is probably pretty high, and the margin's pretty low. And that's the realities of coffee. Is you've got a product that only costs a couple bucks. You're making a small margin on that, and so it's a volume. It's a volume game. So I think with everything colliding, you know, you have global warming, which is affecting agriculture in general. So we're starting to see, you know, big issues with supply that are agricultural and are directly, you know, climate change and global warming related to things like that are in the moment now with inflation and the pandemic and everything that's caused. You know, everything costs so much. And so my fear is like, you know, how many coffee shops can survive, and for how long? If it stays like this, and it keeps getting hotter, and you know, farmers have issues, you know, just growing coffee because it's just getting wet and moldy, and you have random rain when it's supposed to be dry. I mean, coffee agriculture really depends on a very like regular climatic schedule. So you know, I think so. Where are we going? I would like to see there to be like a change in consumer perspective, to coffee. Like, why isn't coffee valued more than it is? It's at some point it's going to get so expensive for a multitude of reasons over the next 10, 20, 30 years. People are going to have to start treating it as something more special than they have been. It's still just treated like a pantry item, like a bag of flour. In the pantry, when there's so much work that goes, especially into specialty coffee, there's so much work at every level that goes into creating to maintaining that quality and creating something of really spectacular quality, and yet we still just kind of sell it away for a very small margin, and until people are willing to like value it like they would value a bottle of whiskey or a craft beer, and actually be willing to pay what it's actually worth. Like, I don't know how coffee shops are going to survive unless people are kind of willing to pay what it's worth in today's climate. I don't know if you agree or disagree with me. So I don't know where that takes us.
Sure,
like, I don't know where like what's next. Like, how do we respond to that?
It's almost like an ominous place to be in, right? Like, wondering how it's going to
Sure, I think we all feel that ominous presence right now in the world with probably anything, but with coffee, that's kind of where my head is at the moment.
Yeah. What about for you, Chip?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? Like the reality is, I think that we are under more pressure than the systems are under more pressure than they have been in the past. Everything from the earth that we keep putting pressure on, and the end result that it has on agriculture and the food that we produce, and from a multi-location, everything from bars to full-scale high-end restaurants. The challenges are that the general economic business model of food and beverage is relatively simple. You have a build out, and then you have to control your cost of goods, and you have to control your labor, and get enough butts in the seats to cover the overhead. Yeah. And the challenge, I think, is that both of those components just keep going up, right? And so the end result is what I'm afraid of. Like the fact that the prices keep increasing is just a reality, but the effects are, and what is sad, and hope we figure out from an economic structure a good balance for all components, is that you have a shift towards either fast cash, right, where you have mass-produced everything, to the ingredients getting put in there, to the automation of everything as much as possible, to control labor, to the packaging, right? Everything is just, how do we make it to where it's affordable and good, and void of anything that is what I would consider service.
The human element.
We're going to a vending machine. That's where we're headed, right?
That's what I was thinking.
I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think we're going to see a lot more automation, a lot more sort of single serve and automated coffee service. Because I think that's just going to come out of the economic realities that we're in. What I'd like to see is something that is maybe a hybrid of what things used to be like in the 90s in the coffee shops, where like that community feel, that human element, and a hybrid of that and technology. Yeah. I don't know how that meshes. I don't know.
It's interesting.
That's I don't want to lose all the humanity of the coffee shop experience.
I'll say it was weird. I was in the Dallas Love Field airport, and it was late, so like I don't remember. It was like they had a Dunkin' Donuts and they had a Starbucks or whatever. They were both closed, but they had this. I don't remember who made it. Coke or Pepsi might own it actually, but it was this kiosk machine thing where you picked what you wanted, and then you put in your name and you put in your phone number, and then this automated machine thing in the back, like made your coffee and then stuck it in the window. You see this like machine, and it's all like see-through, so you can see it happening, and then the coffee just comes out the bottom, and it like sends you a text message that your coffee's ready. And there was something so, I don't even know, like I Am Legend movie. Like it was just such a weird moment of like, oh, like there's no one to talk to. Like there's no like, what? Thanks, machine. Like it was weird. I hope that's not the way it.
So the other side is, so the middle's going away, right? And so the other side is fine dining, where you just pay an enormous amount of money to have service. And so if we can try to figure out a way that, allows for an affordable experience for the general consumer, but also has a functionality that allows the staff to make the money they need to live and have a good life, and the business still make a profit. Like everybody, I think, is trying to figure out what is that new reality. It's a complicated, difficult, simple by no means problem. And so, I think we are driven as humans, though, to be creative and passionate and craving towards food and beverage. And so I think at the end of the day, we're going to continue trying to, and we'll figure out that balance.
Well, I think you guys are doing, I'm one that I don't mind paying for good quality things, a handful of things, and food and beverage and experience is high on that list. And so I enjoy, the quality of food at Hodges, the quality of food at Lowood, it's all across the board. And you're right. Topeca is definitely, at the highest quality of coffee here in Tulsa. But we are lucky. We have a bunch of really good restaurants that give you good service. It's just one of those things you have to be, and I hope more people get to the point where they're okay and understand what they're paying for, right? It's that mental, you got to get to that place where it's like, okay, like it's, this is okay. Like it's, I'm not going to complain about the prices because they have to make a living. They have to make money. Right. It's more for the experience for me. So cheers to you guys for doing a good job and all that. So we know where we can, you just kind of float between places, right? Like I'm
just always trying to make sure there's money in the bank.
Yes. That's an important.
I used to be cupping with this guy every day almost, and I was super involved every single day. And then as we continued, Noah was always wanting to create something and then go on and create another thing and then another thing. I started really focusing on just the accounting and the finance and upper management. And so, we've gotten into real estate recently, just to diversify a little bit. But I think my true love will always be coffee. Yeah.
If I could get a Torero pop up somewhere, that would be great.
Oh, man.
It is one of our dreams for sure.
Yeah. I miss that menu.
I know.
I miss that menu so much.
It was so good.
Yeah.
It was so good. Tell people where they can buy your coffee.
Yeah. Obviously, topecacoffee.com. We'll roast it to order, get it out fresh. If you're here in town, lots of grocery stores carry it. Reese's, Whole Foods, Sprouts, Farmers Market, and most of the Walmarts locations around Green Country. And then, of course, there's a lot of mom and pop shops that
independent shops that use our coffee. The I think that oh wow, it's late on Friday. My brain just stopped.
Did it just stop?
It did.
All right, that's a good point then, right? It stopped. We can stop. No, that's good. I appreciate you guys giving me some of your time. I know a little delayed, and I know you guys got stuff to do, so I appreciate the hour of your time there, and keep up the good work. It's fantastic stuff.
Appreciate you.